My favourite part of playing Warhammer 40,000 is not the matched skill of tournament games on symmetrical terrain, it's the stories. The lore coming to life on the table, lasting stakes and asymmetry coming in as rewards for winning and support for the loser that culminate in an important battle. That is the kind of thing I remember and I talk about with friends years later, not how Game 2 of a tournament went. I do attend tournaments. I go to one every 3 months or so. They're a great way to quickly test army list concepts to see if I'm onto something or if it's silly. 60 Battle Sisters works! It shouldn't, but it does! Putting all my focus on Big Hammer Lady to get that lady's big hammer do the smash smash also works. 11th edition of 40k is meant to merge narrative and competitive together as their design philosophy, rather than the more recent editions where they've had them very separate and not necessarily well defined as to where the lines are. Much older editions had the narrative and the balance together more naturally. Equal deployment zones and the same mission goal were rare, only a get you started into the system. Battles where one side could send waves of attackers at the enemy, but they were at a terrain disadvantage. Or there were missions where you try and wipe out the enemy commander, or you hold to the last. That was the kind of mission that you saw in regular 40k. Equal deployment zones and the same mission goal were rare, but by 10th edition, it had become the norm. Mirrored deployment zones across symmetrical boards, and each player has the same primary mission on the same objective markers. You want the same thing from the same place. You can try and add on a narrative feeling, oh, the sisters want to evacuate the clergy that are huddled in shelters below the objective markers, the Tyranids want to eat them. But that doesn't translate into gameplay. There's a shiny rock, and both sides want to be near the shiny rock for as long as possible, is also equally narrative in that setting. Or, oh, the Centurions are coming, slowly, to protect the Centurion armor factory from the Genestealer cult. You could see that in a battle report. What is not depicted is an objective that is the factory. Games Workshop had been adding more asymmetry. The 2025 to 2026 mission deck had asymmetric missions, and they were fun. It's a different way to play, and it was not sold separately to the main mission deck. I like that. Best mission deck of 10th edition. The 11th edition, 2026 to 2027, chapter approved mission deck has asymmetric primary missions as standard. But as far as I know, all the deployment layouts are symmetrical. But to score points, what one player wants to do is not the same as the other. This leads to different tactics, playstyles, and a lot of preventing your opponent doing a unique thing while you do your own unique thing. And at the same time perform the same secondary missions as your opponent, but in a different order due to the randomness of a card draw. Ooh. Swift, that mission deck will be taken as the standard way to play 40k's 11th edition, and 11th edition is also narrative. Why is there another mission deck described as the narrative mission deck? The Dominatus mission deck is a campaign in card form. That's about as simple as I can describe it. Rather than a campaign book, the words are on smaller cards instead of on pages. And they're separate from each other because it's a deck of cards. They're not glued together to a spine. I expect this is a one-off from Games Workshop before they go back to campaign books like we've seen with the Masters of the Maelstrom, which has a lore book, a campaign book, and a book of new detachment rules for however you want to play. I'm not ruling out that in future they may have a deck of cards instead of a campaign book. It will all come down to how much money Games Workshop thinks they can get from us. And if a deck of cards is easier to store than a book, easier to produce than a book, they will go for more card decks. The campaign has the same aspect we've seen time and again from Games Workshop campaigns. There are 2 or 3 factions. This is usually Imperium as a faction, the main antagonist of the Warzone is another, like Necrons in Pariah Nexus, Chaos in Nakmund, and then an optional 3rd faction is the Raiders that are on the side, sowing discord and wanting both sides to fail. Eldar, Dark Eldar, but it is a everyone else grouping. It's really up to you how many factions you have. With 6 players, that could be 3 sides. Battle Sisters Imperial Guard on one, Chaos Knights, Chaos Demons in another, and the 3rd is Orcs and Genestealer Cult. They're not aligned to each other, but they want the other sides to fail. Or have the Human faction with Genestealer Cult, Sisters and Imperial Guard against the 2 Chaos players and the Orcs as the invaders. Orcs join any scrap, and the Genestealer cult may not want to rise up yet, but blend in and defend their world as the Planetary Defense Force. There are lots of types of campaign Games Workshop has run in the past. Map campaigns like 500 Worlds, basic tree campaigns, where you play Mission A, and then play Mission B or C depending on who won, then play a final mission. You can make your own campaign like that very easily and play it in a day with a friend. The bonuses applied in the final game could be that instead of 10 points for a painting bonus, you start the game with 5 victory points for each previous game you won. If you won the 2 games before the finale, your maximum score is 100 victory points, the weakened player has a cap of 90 points, and they're playing from 10 points behind. Not an insurmountable amount, but it gives a reward from previous victories that help determine the final outcome, an important battle, but the battle is still worth playing. The style of campaign that comes in the Dominatus deck is very similar to the Armageddon Crusade book from June 2025, the 4th War, while Dominatus is about the 5th War. In Armageddon, you play some missions in a campaign step, how many depending on how long you want the campaign to last. The winner of that step gets a bonus, and win or lose, you get a new overall mission to complete. A strategic goal. Have units in the enemy deployment zone at the end of the game, do that and you get strategic points, regardless of winning or losing the battle. Trying to win the war rather than win the battle is an option. If you lose the battle, your opponent will get the mission bonus. That's a trade-off to consider. Then comes the final stage, which could be a final battle, and for each campaign stage your side won, you start the game with that many extra command points. So if 2 of the campaign steps were won by you and none were won by your opponent, the third one being a draw, then you would start the game with 2 command points, getting a third one at the start of the first player turn in the first battle round, and your opponent would get the usual 1 command point at the start of the first turn of the first battle round. So the previous battles do matter for the finale. Having a game where one side is clearly winning, crushing everyone, that then gets flipped at the final standard battle, that isn't so fun. Then nothing you did prior to that mattered. That's why I suggest having 5 victory points be the reward for winning a past game in your own hypothetically made-up campaign. The last fight is the only fight that matters, but you made your chances of winning easier with each past victory. But the difference is not so extreme that there's no point in playing the last game. Otherwise it is best 2 out of 3. That would really be what you're playing. You could do that, but switch it up. Use a mission like Routed Prey from the Leviathan Crusade book, or Breakout from the Armageddon Crusade book to represent the story of the losers trying to conserve their forces. Is it a minor defeat in an ongoing conflict, or a disaster that will take years to recover from? Actually, I don't recommend playing Breakout from Armageddon. Flee past 3 greater demons while pursued by your opponent? I've shied away from that mission. If you have played that mission, let me know what happened. I want to know if it's as bad as I think, or if it's worth playing in its original form. The Dominatus deck has the same cues as Armageddon, but without the Crusade element or the suddenly demons. It has maps, but not really. There are locations that you fight over. They're not connected to one another, and it's random which one you get. So there are 1 of 3 locations for the first phase, and that location has a special rule that applies to all games fought that campaign phase. So if you do the Mannheim Gap as the location your armies are fighting over, then you have the Warzone rules. The battlefield edges that are not the attackers or defenders' battlefield edge are canyon walls. When you make an ingress move, which is when you arrive from reserves, you cannot be set up within 6 inches of a canyon wall unless you can also fly, or you have deep strike. And when a unit ends a move, any move, excluding like pile-in or consolidation, within 6 of a canyon wall, you make a hazard roll for the unit. If canyons didn't seem appropriate to your terrain, say you were fighting in a marsh, then the deep water either side of the battle stops ingress. Instead of rocks falling, people die, tentacle monsters. Having 3 different settings for each of the 3 phases gives replayability. I hope there are no repeat locations like Mannheim Gap 2, now with more rocks. I don't want to see that in my stage 2 of the campaign. If you won the campaign step, there is a permanent bonus to your alliance for the rest of the campaign. So each step will do something. It has a lasting impact. A bonus impact. Then we get the briefing card. Depending on which faction you're in, the attackers, the defenders, or the raiders, this determines your mission, like your strategic overall goal for this step. It has narrative text on the back to explain what happened to your force at the end of the campaign step, depending on how well you did. 3 sections of text, presumably, did you win? Then this happens. Did you draw? This happens. Did you lose? This happens in the narrative. It has the narrative element. The briefing card tells you the agenda. We've seen this sort of thing in Crusade and in the campaigns before. You get a new agenda for each mission that you play within the campaign step. The agenda is only determined after making an army list and picking your detachments to get your force disposition. If you change detachments since last game, that could give you a new agenda. If you played the first game as a take and hold disposition, but the next game was a disruption detachment, you would have a different agenda. If you played a different player to last time, you may also get a different agenda. If you kept the same disruption force disposition, and your first game was against a take and hold player, but your second game was against a priority assets player, your agenda for that game would be different to the previous one. Each of the 3 Grand Alliances have 3 agendas available in each campaign step. So that's 27 different primary missions. Sort of primary missions. It's an agenda. The agenda replaces the primary mission, not the secondary missions, instead of acting alongside it, as it did in Armageddon. I sort of prefer that. It makes you play the mission properly. Sometimes in Armageddon, your strategic goal and the mission did not align. The mission says I need to keep you out of my deployment zone and perform some actions. The strategic mission says I need to end in your deployment zone. Only one affects the campaign, so I will ignore all of the rules of this battle. I'll lose the battle on victory points, but I'll get the strategic points needed to win the campaign. The agenda has 3 ways to complete it. As long as you focus on that, you should win both the game and get the bonus for completing the agenda. So if you've got 35 victory points on primary, that also helps you win the game. Control your opponent's home objective, that gives you in-game victory points and helps you win the battle. Or, and I like it less, your opponent has no objectives in their territory. So you probably killed all of the enemy units. At least you can't get this agenda, the Vital Strong Point agenda, if you have a Purge the Foe force disposition. Then disregard everything, I go kill you is an option. And I don't think it should be an option. I think missions should be the missions that you win by playing the mission. It's nice that it's an option to have this as your primary mission instead of the chapter approved mission deck primary mission. After playing a lot of 11th edition, you may get sick of the primary missions from the 2026-2027 mission deck as your force disposition comes up again against the same enemy force disposition. Another game of my take and hold army against a Purge the Foe army. This gives you more variation, but is optional. I think you would want to take the agenda mission because at the end of the campaign step, the faction that achieves the most agendas gets a bonus relic card. If your side lost 3 games, but achieved 2 agendas, and your opponents in the opposing alliance ignored agendas and went for the 2026-2027 mission deck primary mission, sure, they won the location, but your side got the relic. The campaign in its basic form has each participant play 5 games, in the normal way. There's 2 in step 1, 2 games in campaign step 2, and 1 game in step 3 to give a suitably cool climax. You could probably do 3 battles if you wanted it all done in one day, have each step only have 1 battle, and these battles are intended to be 2,000 points, but playing at 1,000 points could let you do 5 games in a day, assuming that the average game length in 11th edition is about the same as 10th edition. I'm curious what Games Workshop assumes and what is the standard for players once we get going. The tournament standard for 2,000 points in 10th edition is 2 hours and 45 minutes. The casual average is closer to 4 hours. After each step, the winner of the step will get the location bonus, assuming you didn't have an equal number of wins to make it a draw. That happened to me a lot in both of the Armageddon Crusade campaigns I played. Also, after each battle, there is a bonus. Sort of like how the Crusade books had a mission bonus, and there was a leveling up of units and scars and such. But this is simpler. The loser draws a random battle skill card, the winner gets a better version, a battle honor. Hopefully you get a card you can use, but they should be generic and improve a unit. If you did control the Mannheim Gap location, that means if you lose the game, you get to draw another skill card and choose which one to keep. This is going to be different to Crusade. We have not had a Crusade book in 1 year. Crusade was the darling of 9th edition, introduced as the way to play narrative things, and then continued into 10th edition, and we've had some Crusade books, but I think it's fair to assume that the Crusade version of narrative will not be supported anymore. That does not mean it's dead. The Crusade books from 10th edition will still work with the Crusade rules in your 10th edition codex, which is compatible with 11th edition. If you have a Crusade book, play Crusade. Put area terrain where the objectives are and you have a suitable 11th edition game. It's fun to have something you are working towards. The Tau pacifier star system with diplomacy and violence. The sisters follow the life of a living saint. The relatively short life. The Genestealer cult plan and perform their ascension day to rise up. And the Inquisition and Imperial agents try and stop a plot. They don't know what the plot is or who is doing the plot, so uncovering it is the first step. One of the complaints about Crusade was the amount of bookkeeping you needed. How many unique faction points have you got? How far is the living saint through her trials? What is the relative diplomacy and military levels of each of the planets within the Tau star system? There's less to keep track in a campaign compared to Crusade. There's no XP to track on units, no scars, no unique relics for each character, no stat change bonuses recorded in a spreadsheet. There's fewer upgrades, and they come in card form. So you just record which cards your army has and who they apply to. So there is ongoing bookkeeping, but it's not as granular, not as extensive. You don't need to track kills and experience points and bonuses for each unit. I assume that when you get the cards, you're attaching one to a unit for the whole campaign. I'm also guessing you get the chance to change up your army list between games, and if you didn't include the unit that leveled up, you wouldn't get the bonus. Personal growth is better than abstract cards. Than, in this game, the Penitent engines cause battle shock in the fight phase, and the Sacrosancts have extra objective control. On top of their extra objective control. On top of their extra objective control. Because it didn't work so well on the Novitiates last game. Unit bonuses feel more narrative than a pool of cards to dispense at the start of the game. And it's good to have faster leveling up than Crusade. After each battle, at least one unit will get something. Sure, in your first Crusade game, a unit will probably level up if it did something that gave it experience points and you mark it for greatness, but some games, nothing happened to your units. Getting at least one bonus per game can feel like faster progress is made, and in a short campaign, you gain them fast enough to matter. There was a problem with many factions' Crusade rules that the campaign could be over before they got cool things. The Saint has only achieved one trial. Barely any of the planet was eaten by the Tyranids. Ascension Day wasn't close for the Genestealer cult. There was annoyances as the Genestealer cult player that your replacement units from Cult Ambush didn't get any experience points. So if there was an end of game agenda and it was completed by a replacement unit, it didn't get experience or level up. You rolled for scars on the original unit that was destroyed. Fewer upgrade cards help. No scars. I would have liked something, say, if you lose, draw an additional battle skill card, but also draw a scar card for one of your units that was destroyed. You must include that unit in the next game. Instead, the only scars you get are purely psychological, as you turn over the briefing card and see how many millions of your people died, or how many heretics are still alive, or how many babies continue to have unflayed skin. Whatever hurts your side the most. I like this campaign deck in principle. I like all the things shown off so far for it. I could very much see this campaign deck getting played at the Grand Narrative event in November, instead of something Crusade based. I do like tree campaigns with a bonus over a map campaign where you can only attack nearby places. The Dominatus deck has locations, but because they're not stuck next to each other and are a setting with a twist, it gets around the parts I dislike about maps. Also, map campaigns tend to be very, very long. If you're fighting over every location, that could be 30 games. That is too many games. You will run out of energy and interest in the campaign before you get halfway through. If you started the 500 Worlds map campaign, I think you'd struggle to finish it before the start of 11th edition. 5 missions in the campaign, but with the option to extend it, cards permitting. I like that. If there's ever part of a campaign book you don't like, drop it. All rules are optional. You decide how you play it. Games Workshop doesn't get a say. If you don't want to track all the XP and upgrades for units in the campaign, if you don't want to use agendas, agree to skip them and have a simpler system. You could take a Crusade mission book and skip all the elements of Crusade and play the missions alone. I've recommended that before and it makes you a better player and extends your horizons for what 40k can offer. Have a great day of 40k.